we're speaking with Helen Ward, the president of Kids First Parent Association of Canada, and we're going to talk about child protection laws and the process. So, Helen, would you like to just open by telling us some of your basic thoughts on the subject?
Sure. Child protection issues are often in the news, and parents typically know almost nothing at all about what the process is or the laws are. Generally, people don't know much about this, and so I just want to get into some of the details here.
All right. So, why does child protection get involved with a family? What would bring them into a family's life?
Okay, so what happens is somebody makes a report, simply a phone call, an anonymous phone call to the ministry, and the ministry receives that call. It's called a report, and acts from there. They assess that report and go from there. Typically, because remember, these are anonymous reports, and the person who's reporting is protected under the law, like their name doesn't get out. Sometimes these are neighbors, other family members, teachers, other social workers, people involved in medical or therapeutic situations. Basically, anybody can pick up that phone and make that call. And there's a 24/7 hotline that's right on the ministry's front of their webpage, telling all citizens or all residents of BC that they are required to report any possibility of harm or risk of harm or neglect to the ministry. So the ministry is very proactive about getting people to report parents, and so that's what parents are dealing with. Nobody else gets that level of scrutiny.
Now, does the parent ever know who reported them?
They usually can guess, but they're not allowed to be told. Sometimes they're sure they know who it is, but they're not allowed to be told.
So anyone can report a parent for any reason.
Yeah, I mean, they're supposed to be legitimate reports, but there's no way to really assess if they're not legitimate, since it can be anonymous. So anybody can report you.
So then what happens when the ministry gets involved? They get that call, then what happens?
So the ministry gets a call, a report from somebody, and then they have to assess it. So the assessment process usually involves them calling or going to the home of the parent. So you might receive a phone call at any time of the day or night telling you that there's been a report. They may or may not tell you what the allegation or the report is, or they might just come to your door. Typically it would be two social workers coming to your door, knocking on the door. Depending on what the report consists of, they might come with police at that time. So you might just receive a phone call, or you might have a visit from two social workers, or you could have a visit from two social workers plus, I've heard, up to 4 police.
Do you have to let those people into your home?
So they would ask you to talk to them. They would usually want to interview your children without you being with your children. You would be not allowed to be with your children. They'd want to come into your home to look at the home. Basically, they could ask for just about anything, and you can say no. If you say no, they can get a warrant over the phone to have that access. So, and when you don't comply with what they request, like you don't want to talk to them, you don't want them to interview your children, or let them in your home, or whatever that is, there's a red flag then. Also, children can be taken out of class and interviewed by a social worker without the parent's knowledge or consent. So your children in school can be accessed by the ministry without your knowledge or consent, and your child could be interviewed, even like I know a child of 8 years old who was interviewed by a social worker, questions asked, like, does your mother take medication? What kind of medication does your mother take? So, yeah, the child in the school can be accessed by the ministry.
So, what rights do the parents have? Should parents get lawyers involved? What should they do?
Well, just for the parents' rights.
Okay.
That's a really important question. I mean, we all have charter rights. These include the right to security of person, which means your mental and physical well-being. Parents have the liberty right, like the right to life, liberty, and security of person. The liberty right includes, according to the Supreme Court of Canada, the right to raise your child basically as you see fit without interference by the state, except in egregious circumstances when there's evidence of need to do that. So parents have these rights. Children have rights. There's privacy rights. There's all kinds of rights, but all these rights basically are overridden, eviscerated by what is permitted social workers to do. So you can certainly call a lawyer. They come to your door, they phone, you say, I don't want to talk to you, I'm going to talk to my lawyer first. Red flag goes up, and they can, I guess if you just keep your mouth shut, then you're not talking to them, but they can access your children and interview them without your consent, right? So getting a lawyer involved will be important, but then it's really hard to find a lawyer who has specialty in this area and who's willing to stand up for parents and children's rights. That's really hard. That's part of why we're doing this, is so I can help people understand that they do have rights, though it's challenging, and parents are very distressed when these calls come. They're extremely distressed.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
What do I do now? That would be the question.
Yeah. Well, when they come to the door, like they do, you need to know they have the legal right. Like if you don't let them in, they can just literally make a call and they can have access to your home. And if you're and they can also ask police to support them, and the police are required to support them. If the police didn't want to, the police are required to back up the social workers if you were in some ways not compliant. And that can include removing your children, even with this report. If they deemed that the report was serious enough that immediate removal is needed, they can do that. Parents need to know that no evidence is required at this level, at this stage, for the ministry to do all of this. Like literally your children can be removed from your home immediately by the police with no evidence required.
On that very first visit?
Yeah, that would be the worst thing, and typically it's not that bad, but that is definitely possible. The law is called the Child, Family, and Community Services Act, and it gives the ministry more power than police have. For example, if you were concerned, you thought there was somebody harming a child who wasn't a parent, a teacher, a neighbor, anybody, coach, somebody, and you reported that to the ministry, well, they want you to report to the police, because then it's a criminal matter, and then the police would handle it as a criminal matter. But when it's a parent alleged to have done something to their own child, it's not a criminal matter. It's not under criminal law. So all the laws that we kind of expect that, you're innocent until proven guilty, right?
Right.
You have the right to know who accused you and to have that contested face to face. All those laws are not applied in this situation because it's not under criminal law. It's under this Child, Family, Community Services Act. So that's why people they don't understand what's going on, because they think they have rights, but the rights that they have seem to be just overridden by this law, and that no evidence required. Like if a police forces wanted to investigate some situation, they have to get a warrant from a court, and they have to provide some evidence, like for that, before they can get the warrant. But in this situation, no evidence required. So
That's distressing.
it's distressing.
It is. Well, Helen, how can parents avoid the ministry?
you can avoid the ministry. I advise parents, don't talk about your beliefs about child rearing, your discipline practices, your stresses that you may have as a parent, your challenges with your child, to somebody who you don't trust very, very well. If you speak to a counselor, if your kid speaks to a school counselor or some kind of therapist or medical person, a healthcare person of any sort, about some challenge in the family, like, you know, kids are often having challenges in their family, or mom and dad are having disputes and kids might be upset about that. Those people have been, we're all required to report, but folks who are working in those professions are often more proactive about reporting, and they know they're supposed to report. So that's, I would say, I tell parents, I tell children, if you need to have people in your child's life who you trust. If your child has a problem with you, they could talk to them, not to the school counselor or the therapist or whatever. And if you as a parent are having difficulties in your marriage or your relationships or with your kid or your children, be very careful about who you reveal that information to, because as soon as they call the ministry, you're going to be assessed. Rock bottom minimum will be 1 month. This assessment process, like I said, like they come, and then there's an assessment process. Also, there's an investigation process, and I'm not sure what the difference between those two is. But during this assessment investigation process time, which can go on for years, you have no privacy rights. They can speak to anybody. They can access your medical records. They can speak to your doctor, your neighbors, your friends, your employers, your relatives, your spouse, your housemates. Anybody can be spoken to, and the social worker will talk to that person and take notes about whatever the conversation was. And those notes, accurate or inaccurate, are then admissible as evidence in a court. So that's in a criminal thing. Obviously, that would not be admissible evidence. Your neighbor doesn't like
Hearsay.
you. Yeah, it's hearsay. But your mother's mad at you or something, or you have a falling out with somebody, and they talk to them, and that is collaborating evidence. So this is why you don't want to get involved with them. And they could come into your home at any time of the day or night and look at anything they want in your home. Your kitchen, your fridge, your bathroom, your drawers, whatever, your computer, like you have no privacy rights when you're being investigated. People aren't aware of that. They can ask, where does your child sleep? About your sexual romantic relationships. All these can be scrutinized. If you are feeling distressed or something, and you're saying, "Oh, I'm so upset, I can't handle this," then that you're showing that you're not maybe competent as a parent, or your competence as a parent, your capacity to parent, your emotional state. You could have a psychological or parental capacity assessment, which you may have to pay for, which is very expensive. Your children could have to go through some kind of assessment process where some kind of therapist or social worker would be interviewing them and looking into their mental or emotional processes, their history. If you've ever had a challenging past in your life, and you say, "Oh, I was abused as a kid," then that's also could be evidence or possible that you're not able to parent your kids. So you just don't want to get involved with these things.
Just to back up just a second, you said that the parent will have to pay for the assessment, and did I hear that correctly?
Possibly. I'm not sure if that always happens. I know a parent that, I think it was a $7,000 or $8,000 bill for the psychologist who did the assessment, and she paid half of it.
Wow.
I mean, they'll bring in assessors. I mean, I know somebody came in from Alberta to assess a parent here in BC for a week to assess the parent and the kids.
We had no one competent in BC?
Well, they have the people they like to work with, and those reports tend not to be glowing about the parent, and then it counts as an expert report. So when you go to court, so I talked about that initial hearing, it's called a presentation hearing. That's when no evidence is required. And at some point there has to be a protection hearing. And at the protection hearing, that's where the judge is going to, you need to have evidence now. And like the protection hearing is supposed to take place, I think it's, well, the presentation hearing within a week after an apprehension. Presentation hearing, I think it's 3 or 4 months. But they're often, both of these are often delayed. Like you could be looking at a year or 2 before you get to that point where you're actually in front of a judge. What a parent needs to do is get in front of a judge, not sign anything. If they want to sign something, if the parent wants the ministry's assistance, sometimes parents want the ministry's assistance. They want some programs, therapy, education, parenting, whatever. They want that assistance. That's great. But if they don't want it, they need to get in front of a judge. They need to not sign anything because they always want you to consent. And parents usually sign, they consent, but they're not really consenting because they're consenting under duress because they're afraid that their children will be taken away for longer, or that the phone calls or the visits that are permitted will be cut off, and that does happen. So they need to get in front of a judge, and you need to have a lawyer, advocate, who's willing to defend you and your parental rights, because most lawyers aren't expert in this, defending parents' rights. I mean, I've had a legal aid lawyer this is what she's been doing for 25 years, told me she doesn't like that word, parental rights. She says judges don't like talking about the charter. So there are some lawyers who really are willing to defend parents and their rights against the ministry, but there's not very many, and they're kind of hard to find.
So Kids First Parent Association of Canada does have such resources that could help parents.
Well, I've been able to contact some lawyers who would be willing to take this approach and work with them. We did get involved in what was called the Bus Dad case in 2020, which, well, there was an appeal to that in 2020. And so we helped in that case. Like I said, it's challenging. Like lawyers, they're not expert in parental rights, children's rights, and dealing with the ministry. Because ministry, the law permits everything that I'm saying, but the law could be clarified. Like a court could say, well, you've overstepped. I mean, we believe that the Child Family Community Services Act, like that's the law in BC, it's similar in other provinces, that the law itself is a gross violation of parents and children's rights, and the law itself needs to be challenged. It's called a charter challenge when you challenge a law like that, because it does give almost basically unlimited power to government agents to do what they want with you and your child. And part of the problem is that we know, us Canadians know our history of government involvement with children and parents in our country. It's a tragic history. There's no assurance, like if your child is in ministry care, that child is going to be safe. We know that children are abused terribly, and terrible things happen in ministry care. Children die, children are traumatized, children are injured, children are starved, children are robbed, but the law doesn't take into account the risk of okay, you're saying the parent is a risk? Well, the ministry is a risk, and normally you would want to balance the risks, and that's not happening. And if a lawyer isn't willing to address that, like the risk of the harm to the child from the ministry involvement, the risk of harm to the child in the parent's care, well, what is that? So we do want to challenge the law itself as
We've spoken about the parents' rights. Maybe you could expound on the children's rights. Do children have rights?
Yeah, children have rights. They have all the charter rights that everybody else has, and those. I mean, they also have there's the the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which is a UN document that Canada has signed on to, and one of the rights children have is the right to be cared for by their parents, and the right And the state has an obligation not to interfere with the rights and duties of parents to raise their children. But these are routinely ignored. If a child is like one of the part of the Child Family Community Services Act says children have a right to access and know about and be informed about. It's called, what is it? The Representative for Children and Youth. Representative for Children and Youth in BC. Many people heard about Marie Ellen Turpel Lafont. She was quite a noted person in that role. So kids who are involved in the ministry are supposed to be informed about this, given access to this government agency, which will then support their rights. Like if you go onto that website, it's all about the children's rights. And some kids are quite capable of, depending on their age and maturity and all that, they could understand this stuff, and they could say, I don't want to be here. I want to go home, which kids do say. But I haven't met a child or heard of a child who was actually informed about this agency. They're supposed to know about it, be supported in accessing it, and if they do call or contact them, they're supposed to be given privacy. Like say they're calling from the foster home or something like that, they should be given privacy to have that interaction. But I don't know. I haven't encountered that. Maybe it does happen. I haven't encountered it happening. So that's right in their law that children are supposed to be given that information. But yeah, and children, all the charter rights that children have all those rights. If a child is distressed, upset, children also have the right to a voice in the proceedings and to know about what the plan is for them and to have a voice. Like, it's not that their opinion is going to be the deciding factor, but they're supposed to be part of that. And sometimes they apparently don't always, that doesn't always happen. And kids, they don't typically know their rights anyway. So it's kind of a mess.
I see. It sounds so. So Helen, in summing up, what would you recommend that parents do if the ministry shows up at their door?
Record, if possible, on your phone or something like that. All conversations, all interactions. Video, if not video, audio. Have somebody with you at all times, a support person. Possibly they could be a witness too, but just because you will be very, very distressed and you need somebody to help you. Do things in writing, like text, email, writing, rather than conversations. Do not talk to them about any past trauma and harms you have, or don't talk on and on to them. Parents often just start having a conversation, defending themselves. I feed my kid the best food, I love my kid, and all this kind of thing. I would advise don't do that. Get a lawyer as soon as possible. Yeah.
So if the ministry shows up at your door, it's best to let them in.
Well, I would say tell them get a lawyer. Say you can come. I need to talk to my lawyer first.
Okay.
I mean they can come in anyway, but you can insist that because they will probably want to interview your child. You can insist that. Don't ask them. Insist that this be recorded. Because they'll tell you they're not allowed to do. They can't do that, but it's not true. They can and do record these kinds of things.
So insist that the interview with your child be recorded.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And your child, like, I don't know, when I was a kid, if some stranger was coming into and talking to me, I wouldn't even be able to talk to them. I would have been very, very nervous. You could ask for a support person, a neighbor, a friend, even another kid, even, I don't know, to be with your child during the interview just as a support person and as a witness for your kid. Because your child has the right to security of person, and this interview, even if it's a very benign situation and all the rest of it, it's very stressful for a child to have a stranger talk to them about their parents. Like, well, how often what do you have, for breakfast? What time do you go to school? Does your dad ever get mad at you? What does he do when he gets mad? Does he ever hit you? Or these sorts of things are distressing for a child, and that's a violation of the parent-child relationship. Like maybe in some cases this needs to happen, but how you interview a child is a very delicate process, and from what I've heard and seen, that the delicacy of that interview process is not respected. Because children are very leading questions and all the rest. Also, kids also don't know things. A child may be mad at their parent. There's all these sorts of things could be part of it. So the social worker, her process, his or her process, should be on recorded and say we're not doing it. I mean, you can just insist on that.
And that is your right to insist on.
Yeah, well, it's like they will tell you. I mean, they tell some parents, "Oh, sure, no problem." Other parents, they tell them, "No, you can't do that. We don't do that." So they don't tell parents the same thing, but it's your right, for sure, to have that recorded. You could record things without them knowing. They don't. I mean, if you want to tell them, but if they were coming into your home and you've got a phone or somebody's holding a phone, they don't need to know. It's legally acceptable to record somebody in a video or a phone conversation if you are part of that without them knowing.
I see. So, just to clarify, when they come to your door unexpectedly, and you're alone at home with your children, can you refuse them entrance until you get a support person? Ask them to come back in 1 hour, and
you could try, and that might be successful. I mean, if they want to not allow that, then they can do that. They have the right to come in. If they have to get approval from a judge, but that just is a phone call. So that's quite easy. But they're quite likely to say, come back tomorrow. I'm not doing this now. I need to talk to my lawyer. It's quite possible that they will back off for that time, and you take advantage of that time. And it's important to be it's partly a personality thing to be strong and clear. Like, that's not happening. I'm going to find a lawyer. You're not speaking to my kids now. We will need to have that recorded, and my children will need a support person. And my children have rights, and I have rights. You keep mentioning your rights. You keep mentioning the charter. Keep mentioning the children's charter rights. You just keep saying it, even if you don't know what else you're saying. It has an impact, and you can ask what law you're acting under, what section of that law, and ask them to put it in writing.
That's
and then
important.
Sometimes they back off, partly because the parent is just too fierce. Yeah, like if they're acting under the Child Family Community Services Act, well, I want to see what part of the law you're acting under. What am I being accused of? You can ask them. You have a right to know what the report says. If the report was said, the child hasn't eaten, the child has lots of bruises, the child was denied medical treatment, or sometimes the report is the kid's late for school, parent yells at them, things that you don't think are really worth reporting do get reported, and they do act on them.
I see.
So there you go.
Oh my goodness. So parents, from the sounds of from what you've said, it is imperative to stay calm and focused during these interviews. Unemotional, if at all possible. Tuck those emotions away and be as clear and as brief as possible.
Don't engage in a long conversation, justifying yourself, explaining all the good things you do for your kid, talking about if you do have challenges and difficulties, as we all do, financial or emotional or whatever. You're giving them ammunition when you say, "Oh, I'm really stressed because I just lost my job, or my husband left me, or something. I just can't handle things." If you say you can't handle things, or you're distressed, that can be. Do you have the capacity to parent? We need to assess your emotional capacity, your parental capacity. Maybe you need therapy. I mean, you could be doing years of therapy, or if you have a drug problem, or you sometimes smoke pot or whatever. You still have rights, even if you are a parent who's really doing things you shouldn't do. You still have rights. and your children still have rights.
Mhm.
And the ministry is supposed to follow their laws and procedures. So even if you are, like, maybe you do deserve this intervention, maybe you are in some ways harming or neglecting your child, you still have rights, and they still have obligations in how they handle you and your child. Like, and that needs to be nobody's perfect. And the way the law currently stands in BC, and I think across Canada, every single parent you've ever met it deserves to have that knock at the door. We've all abused our children according to how they define it, which is extremely broad. So I hope this is helpful to parents who are may find themselves, or like just we should be informed. We need to be informed and to inform others, so we're not completely taken off guard, and so we can equip ourselves and take legal action to protect parents. I mean, it's the balance of power between parents and government has got completely out of whack.
So, and Kids First Parent Association of Canada does offer assistance to parents in these situations.
Yeah. Talking like this, the way done, sometimes specific information. Occasionally could help you connect with a lawyer who might take these issues forward. It's a very difficult situation. I do not have all the answers, but we need a change for parents, and I want to be part of that.
Thank you so much, Helen. That was very informative.
Thank you.